So, here we are at the Grand Prix. We are very happy to welcome you for the Grand Prix, the Blue Metropolis Grand Prix. My name is Marie-Andrée Lamontagne. I'm the Director of Programming of the Blue Metropolis International Literary Festival, full name. This year's festival looks set to be an exceptional one. The literary reputation of the guests, the quality and depth of the discussions, and the public's, your appetite for literature, it's all very pleasing. The highlight of the festival is undoubtedly the Grand Prix award ceremony. And here we are in 2025 to Salman Rushdie. I now invite Anne Whitler. Where is Anne Whitler? Oh, over there. Anne Whitler. She's member of the board of directors of the Blue Metropolis Foundation and Provost and Academic Vice President at Concordia University, to give Salman Rushdie the trophy and say a few words, of course.
Very few words, because I know you're not here to listen to me. It is a great pleasure for me to be here on behalf of Concordia University. We have been partners with Blue Metropolis and the Literary Festival for 20 years. And as many of you know, universities, or I hope many of you know, universities are places where difficult conversations happen, where knowledge is developed and debated, and big ideas are talked about. And I can't think of anybody who has most beautifully and courageously embodied the importance of having courageous and difficult conversations than our award winner tonight, Mr. Salman Rushdie. So I am very pleased on behalf of Blue Met to present you the Grand Prix Award for 2025.
Oh, yes.
Tous les trois, also with Eleanor Wachtel. Okay, we take a group photo. We take a group photo before you speak,
right,
and
yes.
then you'll talk.
You see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Eleanor, please.
Here.
Eleanor, the technician.
Yep. Well, thank you very much. Looks very nice. It's like a glass tusk. Anyway, look, it's a long time since I've been in Montreal, maybe 15 years or more. So it's very nice to come back and be in this beautiful city. And with all of you, thank you all for coming. And I'm sorry it was slow. It's my fault, like everything else. But I'm delighted to be here and to talk to my old friend Eleanor, and let's have a nice evening. Thank you.
So now it is probably the most interesting part of the award ceremony, the interview part. So Eleanor Wachtel, do I have to present you Eleanor Wachtel? I don't think so. So they will, the interview will take, let's see, will last maybe 40, 45 minutes. And then there will be at the end, we'll have, let's say 7 or 8 minutes for some questions from the audience or from the press, if there is. I don't know who they are. I think it's over there. So if you have questions, the journalists, they can ask their questions. So we're listening to you.
Great. Okay. Feels like it's far. This feels far away to me.
Can you hear properly? No.
Not really. I think it's better. Can you hear me?
Oh, it better be close. This is better? Yeah, okay.
And this? Okay. I just thought the mics should face each other.
You're
so
quite
we would
right.
Look
No,
at
no.
each other rather than stare off.
One thing I know is you know about microphones.
Yes. So, how are you feeling? I mean, how are your spirits? And I have to say that I never start an interview that way. And the last time I did was with you in 1992, when you made a secret visit to Toronto
Yes.
for an appearance at a PEN Canada event and to meet with Canadian politicians. But how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. It was very nice to be here. I'm very pleased to be here. It's been, I mean, I've been in Canada on and off quite a few times, but somehow not to this part of the country. I've been in Toronto many times, and Ottawa, and Vancouver, and other stranger places, Stratford, Ontario.
Yes, Banff. I think we spoke in Banff
yes,
one time.
Banff.
Yeah.
I once had a very beautiful train ride through the Fraser River Valley, and so on. So I've seen a bit of Canada, and I've been here to Montreal. I've been here a couple of times, but I was trying to remember how long ago it was, and it's at least 15 years. So a long time. It's good to be back.
Good, good. So you're well physically, mentally?
I'm all right.
You're still seeing a shrink?
Yeah.
Well, you live in New York, you know.
You know, this is America. Yeah. The shriek comes with the territory.
Okay, I will start for real. And I'd like to begin with miracles, and not just the fact that you're sitting with me here tonight, but which we'll get to shortly, but the miraculous in your fiction. As you say in your memoir, Knife, I don't believe in miracles, but my books do. How did the miraculous enter your work or become such a part of your storytelling?
It's just, you know, if you think about realism in the novel, it's a relatively recent invention. You know, it's kind of the 19th century. Most of the history of the novel is fantastic. You know, people, very strange things happen. I mean, if we go to the 18th century and you have Tristram Shandy and Gulliver's Travels, if you go further back, then you get Don Quixote. You know, realism is a recent invention and may have outlived its usefulness. Because, you know, it's like a Tesla. Because it seems that the world is no longer realistic. The world is surreal. And it's so bizarre nowadays that realism doesn't seem able to encompass it. So for me, that's the fantasy fiction. You know, naturalistic fiction. The world isn't naturalistic. The world is very, very strange right now.
But I remember back then you talked about how the miraculous and everyday coexist, especially in India, a country.
Well, also Latin America. I mean, I remember when I went to Latin America for the first time, I went there after I'd read all these great writers, but I'd never been there. And the first time I went, I was briefly in Cuba, and then I was in Nicaragua to report. I wrote a short reportage book about the Contra War and the Sandinista Revolution. And I got there and I thought, oh, it's really like that. With Garcia Marquez, he didn't make it up. And he always said, there's nothing in my books that I made up. So, and I thought it's really true. And also I found it very familiar in many ways because the cultures of Latin America and India had many, many things in common. You know, they both have a colonial history, different colonizers, but a colonial history. They both have great differences between wealth and poverty. They both have an enormously powerful religious influence, different religions, but still. And a great kind of tension between the reality of the city and the reality of the village. And I thought, this is like the world that I know translated into Spanish. You know, and it felt familiar, even though I'd never been there. So I think maybe, you know, you read contemporary African fiction, you get a similar feeling. You know, the invention of this thing called Afrofuturism is a blending of real observation and imaginative writing. And even, you know, your own Margaret Atwood has done very well by abandoning realism.
Except that she says that everything is real.
And,
And
I
it's
mean,
been
boy, is she
unfortunately
right.
proven right.
Is she right?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
But I mean, I know she uses the term speculative fiction, and I think that's a good term, you know, because the novel of ideas has always been present. I mean, I've just been, for reasons I won't bore you with, reading again Voltaire's Candide, and there's a book which doesn't obey any rules, you know, and people die and come back to life. Crossing the Atlantic Ocean seems to take about 5 minutes. and there he is breaking every rule and writing a masterpiece. So I think this is not new, the kind of thing that I have done quite a lot, because you find it in every culture at different times. Like, you know, Kafka is not exactly naturalistic, nor is Mikhail Bulgakov. So on.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it crops up everywhere.
But I remember I once asked you what book made you what you are today, and you said 1001 Nights.
Yeah, I might also say Alice in Wonderland. That was it. I think if I talk about the first book that I actually fell in love with, it was Alice in Wonderland. I mean, as a child. It's interesting what children's books got to India and what didn't. You know, Alice got there. Winnie the Pooh did not. I had to read Winnie the Pooh when I was much too old.
But you did write a novel, you did your own take on 1001 Nights in your
Yes.
2015 novel, 2 years, 8 months, and 28 nights, which if you do the math, is 1001.
You know, the weird thing about when that book came out is that there was always somebody in the audience who would stand up and say, "What about if it's a leap year?" And I was saying, it's not a fucking leap year.
But it was your father, you said, who read to you from the Great Wonder Tales.
Well, he told me his own versions. It wasn't so much, because, you know, if you look at the 1001 Nights, it's not written for children. You know, it's a very adult book. I mean, it's for a start, it's full of sex. And
Well, you had the unexpurgated version in India. Here in Canada, we had
oh, you had cleaned up
no
version?
sex.
Oh, okay, maybe 1001 Afternoons.
But was your father a good reader, or a good
Yeah,
storyteller?
well, I mean, you know, it's 100 years ago, but I remember that he was enjoyable at bedtime when he wasn't drunk, which was never. No, that was the problem with him, you know, is that on the one hand he was delightful, on the other hand he had a real drinking problem, so that made him a problematic father.
Yeah, I know. Your father makes an appearance in your memoir, Knife, and as you recall, flying with him to England in January 1961 when you were 13, 14.
13 and a half, yeah.
Yeah, about to start boarding school, and he was a difficult man and a kind of dark presence in your story. Can you talk?
But you know, the
about
funny
that?
thing is that, I mean, he's been gone a long time. He died in 1987. He shows up in my dreams, and in my dreams he's great. He's really loving and friendly and warm-hearted. I mean, he's been much better since he died than he was when he was alive. And so I kind of restored my relationship with him posthumously. Now I'm very fond of him.
No, but I was surprised he showed up in this memoir.
Yeah, well, you know.
No, and not in a very good light most of.
No, I mean it's I think anybody who's read my books knows that there's a problematic relationship between fathers and sons kind of running through a few of them. And there you are. That's part of what you get from childhood. You don't choose it.
But in this one, you talk about actually striking him once when he was abusing your mother,
gosh.
which I
Yes, that's true.
I didn't see that anywhere.
I did hit him once. Yeah, he didn't hit me back. He was being rude to my mother, and I got angry, and I was just about 19 or 20 years old. And I hit him, and then because he was very strong, my father. And I hit him, and then I thought, God, now he's going to hit me back. And it's going to really hurt. But he didn't. I think he was in some way ashamed, maybe.
And your father was convinced that you weren't the writer in the family, that it was your middle sister.
Yeah, that's right. No, he always used to say that she was the writer in the family. She never wrote anything, of course.
And when you told him you wanted to be a writer, he said, what will I
tell my friends? Yeah, that's right. But what was fortunate was that he lived long enough for his friends to start calling him and congratulating him on my work, and then he took the credit, which is fine. I would have done the same.
And your mother was a teacher who also liked stories of a different kind. You've described her as a world-class gossip.
Yeah, she told true stories that weren't supposed to be told.
What kind of influence did she have on you, do you think?
Well, you know, she was the better reader, actually. She read books very well. You know, and although my father was the one who'd studied English literature at Cambridge, my mother was a better reader, more intelligent reader. You could have conversations with her about books which were interesting.
Did she read your books?
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote she read, you know, Midnight's Children and Shame and so on, but she lived much longer than my father. So I remember when I wrote put together my first collection of nonfiction imaginary homelands, and I sent her that. She said, "This is good because they're really short and I could read one at a time. I don't have to sit down and read a 500-page book." So yeah, she liked them short.
But what was interesting, though, about your mother was that she loved gossip, but she had her own secrets about her first marriage, about her...
Yes, there were secrets. I mean, you know, I think everybody's got secrets. And I didn't know for a long time that both my parents had been married before. That was a real dark family secret that eventually emerged, and then I put it in Midnight's Children. And yeah, and my mother...
I can see why they kept secrets from you.
Well, you know, there's a famous line by, I think it's Czesław Miłosz, who said, when a writer enters a family, the family is fucked.
I thought that was Philip Roth.
But so true.
Now, at King's College, Cambridge, which was your father's alma mater, you studied history. What were your aspirations?
What I didn't want to be was an academic. You know, I always loved the study of history. I was very happy at Cambridge studying history. But it never occurred to me to go into, you know, postgraduate studies or to try and have an academic life. What I wanted to be when I was at Cambridge, I wanted to be an actor. I mean, I spent much more time. There's a very active student theatre scene at Cambridge, and I spent a lot of time involved with that. I got the college annoyed because they thought I wasn't paying enough attention to my actual academic studies, and they threatened to withdraw I had a minor scholarship. They threatened to withdraw it, and I said, well, okay. And I went on acting, and they withdrew the minor scholarship. So my father had to pay more money. But I did a lot of acting at Cambridge, and I was in all sorts of things. There was a production of Ben Jonson's Alchemist that I was in, which took place in Jesus College cloisters, and the research showed that that was where the first ever production of The Alchemist had been held. Oh. So we were performing in the birthplace of the play. I was in UNESCO's Rhinoceros. I now know how to turn into a rhinoceros.
You know how to what?
Turn into a rhinoceros, because that's what happens to the characters in the play. They gradually turn into rhinoceroses. And I remember, I mean, it's the theatre of the absurd, you know, and there was a very talented young director who was doing it. He was called Keith Hack, who had worked at the Berliner Ensemble and so on. And I said to him, what's this about, this play? And he said, very kindly, he said, you know, Salman, it's about fascism. And I said, oh, how is it about fascism? and he said, well, it's about how you could be living in a community and suddenly your next door neighbors turn into monsters. And people who you were hanging out with last week and your children were playing with their children. And suddenly they're monsters and they're terrifying. They're rhinoceroses. And I said, oh, that's very good. And then when I wrote my novel, Quichotte, I stole it. I stole that idea. I thought I can't have rhinoceroses because
it'll be too obvious.
Because UNESCO has rhinoceroses. So I had pink elephants. I had characters turning into pink elephants for the same reason, to denote they're becoming monsters. So, you know, everybody, one of the great pieces of advice to writers is if you're going to steal stuff, steal the good stuff. Don't steal the cheap silver.
But since this little iceberg is a Lifetime Achievement Award, I am interested in how you went from there, from history to acting to writing. And you actually had some conversations with E.M. Forster.
I did. I was lucky enough that he was a fellow at King's College when I was 19 and he was 91. And also for half the time I was at Cambridge, he wasn't there because he fell down some stairs and was badly hurt and almost died. So he was there at the beginning of my time, and he was there again, fortunately, at the end of my time. But because India had been so important for him, he was interested in my Indian background. And so I had tea with him a few times. I played croquet with E.M. Forster in King's Fellows Garden. That's a sentence, unlikely sentence.
It's like something out of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
Speaking of.
Yeah, and he was very approachable and very friendly. And of course, a lot of the students were terrified that E.M. Forster, we can't go anywhere near him. But actually, he would come and sit in the students' common room and get a little drink, and would welcome people coming up to chat to him. So he was a nice man, very approachable person.
And he encouraged you.
He said a nice thing to me, yeah. And I kind of shyly, terrifiedly confessed that I might want to, at some point, write a book. It's like telling Shakespeare you want to write a play. And he very generously said he always thought that the best books about India would be written by somebody with, as he said, a Cambridge education, but coming from there. And I thought, thank you very much. I just put that in my inside pocket and kept it there until I did something.
Well, one of the somethings you did was Midnight's Children. I mean, the sensibility that you had came out in your 1981 novel. It became an international success. How did you, you were just 33 at the time. How did you find your voice or style with Midnight's Children? How did that happen?
It wasn't easy, is the answer. Because I had published one novel before, which I had come to feel was very flawed, and which didn't get a very good response when it was published. Although I have to say that the person who really liked it was Ursula K. Le Guin. And I was always very proud of that fact. And then after that, she followed my career and frequently wrote about my work. I was very touched. And I didn't know her, I'd never met her. And then just a couple of years before she died, I was on some book tour in, I think, Portland, Oregon.
Right, there's Seattle, that area.
Yeah, and she came to my event just to say hello. And so I very briefly was able to talk to her and thank her for giving me a little starting push and then staying interested. So so that was, but after that slightly false start, I had to really rethink what I thought about my writing. And I thought, well, to use the old cliche, write what you know. And so I thought I would write a novel about childhood, which was based in my childhood, where I grew up in Bombay, as it then was, and as I still call it. And if you want, I can give you my $2 on why Bombay and not Mumbai is the correct name.
Oh, give us.
You want that?
Yeah. The $2 bill is no longer Canadian currency, but
it's no, exactly.
We'll get there.
Yeah. No, Bombay is unlike other major Indian cities in that it's not an ancient city. Delhi's been there thousands of years, and Calcutta is an old city. Bombay is a city that the British built in India on 7 islands, and land between the islands they reclaimed from the sea to create a kind of peninsula. Initially, before it was in British possession, it was colonized by the Portuguese. And when Charles II was King of England in the 17th century, the British negotiated a marriage for him with Princess Catarina of Braganza of the Portuguese royal house. And Charles II was famously a kind of playboy, liked pretty girls, and Princess Catarina was famously not a pretty girl. And so the British had to negotiate a very big dowry. And Bombay came from the Portuguese to the British in Princess Catarina's dowry. And the British immediately built a fort on it and put the navy in the harbor, and the British Empire followed. And the Portuguese had called it Bombaia because of the harbor, the beautiful bay, Bombaia. And Bombaia became Bombay. And in the various languages of India, it's mostly been called that. In Hindi, it's called Bombay. In Gujarati, it's called Bombay. In Marathi, it's called Mumbai, and always was. And because what happened is that Bombay became the capital of the state of Maharashtra. And there arose a kind of right-wing Hindu nationalist Marathi regionalist party called the Shiv Sena, which took power in Bombay. They wanted to Marathaize all the names. And so they changed it from Bombay to Mumbai. And then produced a false history for the reason why, which is that one of the popular goddesses in that part of the country is the goddess Mumba Devi. Mumba Devi meaning Mumba the goddess. Mumba Devi's name can also be rendered as Mumbabai, Lady Mumba. And so the argument was that the city was named after Mumbabai, which was collapsed into Mumbai, which is a very good explanation. It's just not true.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
So there you are. There's the. You could give me
at least $10.
You could give me leave the $2 on your way out.
Yeah, but you started saying that, and you're growing up in Mumbai.
Yeah, and I mean
in Bombay.
Yeah, and Bombay it is a very cosmopolitan city because it's the big city on the western seashore, and so it's the major port. And so it has, first of all, it's now the economic powerhouse of the country, apart from the new technology industries, which are all in South India. But traditional economics, in textile, steel, all that kind of stuff is around Bombay. And also because of it being west-facing, there are more non-Indians living in Bombay than anywhere else in the country. Europeans, Americans, Japanese. They had to come a long way around. But also, in terms of India, it's very cosmopolitan because people from all over India gather there. Because everything to the north of Bombay is North India. Everything to the south of Bombay is South India. And because it's such an economic magnet, people come from all over. So you have every different kind of Indian living there, and many, many languages spoken in the streets. And the other cities are not like that. If you're in Delhi, it's mostly people from the Indo-Gangetic Plain and mostly speaking Hindi. If you're in Calcutta, it's mostly Bengali people and they're speaking Bengali. And if you're in Madras, now called Chennai, for equally spurious reasons, most people are speaking Tamil. But Bombay is everyone. And so you grow up in this everyone city, this kind of world city.
But you recently described Midnight's Children as a book in which you try to reclaim not only India but myself.
Yeah, I mean, I was living in England. After I left university, I was living in London, and I was kind of worried about losing touch with for want of a better word, my roots. And I thought that I wanted to get that back. So I did two things. First, I gave up my job in advertising, and I took all the money I'd saved and went to India for as long as I could go. living very, very cheaply, traveling on like 14-hour bus journeys because I couldn't afford plane flights. And just being there as deeply as I could, a lot of it going to places that I knew very well, and in some parts going to places I had not been before that I wanted to see. And out of that came what became Midnight's Children. I was there for, I don't know, not quite 6 months. And then I came back with a book to write. And so the second thing I did was write the book. But it was a huge, I had to teach myself how to write the book. I didn't know how to write books. I'd written one book that hadn't done very well. So I had to learn on the job, And I remember having a quite stumbling start when I was writing Midnight's Children. And because initially I hadn't had the idea of making it a first-person narrative. And it just wasn't working. And one day I thought, what would happen if I let him tell the story? And I sat down, and I remember this day very vividly. And what came out of my typewriter, we had these things called typewriters, and was essentially what is the first paragraph of Midnight's Children. I mean, more or less. I did do some little reshaping, but not very much. And I just thought, where did this come from? Because it was quite clearly the best thing I'd ever written in my life. And I just thought, this voice is so strong, I better just let him go. Let him just go and just hold on to his coattails and go along for the ride. And that's what I did. So he told the story. I just wrote it down.
And you followed Midnight's Children with shame, which cemented your reputation as one of the most original, inventive, contemporary writers. And as you've said, there was a point in your life where you could have written a version of Midnight's Children every few years, but you always wanted to find something that you hadn't done.
Well, I still think that.
Exactly. And the next thing, that next new thing, was your 1988 novel, The Satanic Verses. And we don't need a reminder of what happened when that book came out, and its impact on you in the decade that followed. But again, you were determined not to be silenced as a writer. You weren't, and you continue to write and publish books of fiction, essays. But how do you think your subject matter was affected? I mean, the themes that interested you, or was it? Because you've written 2 memoirs, but apart from that.
Well, yeah, I think the nonfiction, the memoirs would not have been written. Because one of the things about being a writer that I always thought that the last thing I wanted to do was to write about myself. Just no interest in writing about myself. I wanted to, make shit up. And then I acquired the curse of an interesting life. And then I thought, well, I don't want anybody else to tell that story because, as it happens, I'm a writer. So I want to tell that story. But no, just to go back for a minute to the Satanic Verses, what I thought I was doing, primarily what I thought I was doing was write a novel about London. Because I felt I've written 2 books about the world I came from.
India and Pakistan.
India, Pakistan. Yeah. And I want to write a book about the world I came to, and about people like me who have made that migration from South Asia to England. And this was in the mid-'80s, and it was at the time of Margaret Thatcher, and quite a lot more racial hostility towards South Asian people in England than maybe there is now. It was the age of what was called Paki bashing, when there were violent attacks. So Paki was the generic term for Pakistanis, Indians, Bangladeshis, etc. But so a time of racial unrest. And I had been working as on a voluntary basis with race relations organizations in London during the 70s. And so I knew quite a lot about the Asian immigrant communities of different kinds. Muslims here, Sikhs there, Hindus there, different parts of London. And so I invented this London borough called Brickhall, which was a mixture of Brick Lane, which is where the Muslim population was living, and Southall, which is where the Hindu population was living. The Sikh population was based around Wembley Stadium, and I couldn't get that into the name. Anyway, so I had all this experience that I wanted to draw on. And so I thought about it as my London novel. And in the course of the London novel, there's a character going crazy, having dreams about the birth of a religion. And there were some people who didn't like that. But I always thought that this is my London about England. This is my English novel. I think now, because the fuss has died down, now people are able to read it more neutrally, not expecting it to be scandalous. I mean, for a start, it's so long ago, 1988, that if anybody is like 40, it's ancient history. So younger readers particularly are able to just approach it as a book. And people seem to like it. And I've always thought, I don't see why the people who didn't like the book get to say what it's about. Because normally...
Or the people who didn't read it, actually.
Didn't read it, no, of course. No, I mean, yeah, that's a sole point. That most of the people who attacked it had absolutely no idea what it was about. And I had, two things happened with the book as it's lived its life. People write to me or talk to me and they say two things. The first thing they say is, where's the dirty bit? Where's the bit that all, because we couldn't see where the trouble was. And I say, yeah, there is that. And then they say, who knew that it was funny? And I say, well,
anyone who knew you would know it was funny.
I say people who read it knew that it was funny. And so gradually it's begun to acquire a readership which is not tainted by the shadow of what happened to it. And that's kind of worth fighting for.
I feel I should skip ahead to
Yeah.
that taintedness, because it was through your involvement with PEN and other organizations. You've been a high-profile defender of free speech, and ironically, it was your role in the creation of Sanctuary for Writers Under Threat of persecution that took you to Chautauqua in southwest New York State in August 2022. Now, you say you don't believe in premonitions, but you had a rather charged dream two nights before the event.
Yeah, I had a dream about being attacked in an amphitheater. I mean, the amphitheater was kind of like the Colosseum, and the attacker was like a gladiator, rather than...
With a spear.
With a spear, with a sort of javelin-like thing. So not like a little squirt with a knife.
But what, I mean...
But I mean, I woke up in the morning and I was woken up by this dream. And I told my wife, Eliza, and I said, I had this dream. And I said, maybe I shouldn't. I knew that the place where I was going to speak was an amphitheater, which is probably why it ended up in my dream. I thought, maybe I shouldn't go. And then I thought, people don't change their plans because they had a bad dream. And I'll go. Maybe I should have paid attention to the dream.
Do you normally remember your dreams?
Not, one of the things I always used to think about my dreams is my dreams were really boring. I used to feel I've used up all my imagination when I'm awake. So my dreams used to be, I went for a walk. I read the newspaper. And I liked it, that my dreams had this absolute banality.
Yeah.
Since the attack, the dreams have become more dramatic. I mean, I'm not saying they're all violent and so on, but they have more action.
Would you consider using a dream? Or I guess you wouldn't have used a dream earlier in your fiction because it...
Well, the biggest dream sequence is the one in the Satanic Verses, the guy dreaming the origin of a religion.
But that isn't the dream that you had.
That isn't a dream that I had, no. And I mean, otherwise, I do agree mostly with people who say that dreams are too easy. To put a dream in a book.
To put a dream, yeah.
It's just like, you can make anything happen, and therefore nothing matters. So I broadly speaking agree with that if you're going to use dream sequences, they have to be very carefully understood how they work inside the story. I've certainly not done anything on the scale. One of the problems of having written this number of books is I can't remember things, whether one of you may remember a dream sequence in another. Yeah, so in which case you're probably right. Actually, just parenthetically, one of the things that is the most worrying thing about having done this for half a century is the risk of unintentional repetition. And the person who tells you this is your translator. I mean, I remember my Danish translator wrote to me and said, in your new book, on page 237, such and such character says so and so. And as of course you know, 30 years ago, in this earlier novel, on page 186, this completely different character says the same thing. And I just wondered why you felt the need to make an intertextual connection between these words. Then you have to pretend you did it on purpose.
The opening chapter of your memoir, Knife, is very immediate, very visceral. The reader is with you in the moment, both in your head and at the same time following the action on stage, literally, in your body, and somehow detached from it as well. And the account is horrifying and riveting, but what was it like for you to go back into that experience to relive it on the page?
Well, that first chapter was very hard to write. Took me a while to decide that I wanted to do it at all. And then I knew that, you can't bury the lead, as they say. If this is the subject, you've got to put the subject up there right from the outset. So I said, okay, I have to do it. And then I thought, just do it. Just tell the story. And one of the strange things about it, once I'd done it, the rest of the book became easier to write. I mean, quite a lot easier to write. But then I discovered, as more evidence was revealed, like, for example, there's film footage of what had happened and so on, is that my memory wasn't exactly right. And I think that's the thing that happens to us all in a moment of crisis. You fill in the gaps in your memory, and sometimes and then you have to absolutely believe the version you've told yourself, and the film tells you something else. So, for instance, I thought I was standing up, but actually I was sitting down when he got to me. Things like that. Where were you? What did you do next? The thing is also, everything happened at very, very high speed, and also.
Well, 27 seconds.
Yeah, that was, again, that's a number that I got out of newspaper reports. I mean, I didn't have a stopwatch at the time. But 27 seconds sounds, when you say it like that, like not very long. But actually, if one of you has a knife and one of you doesn't, you can do a lot of damage in half a minute.
You said that the first thing you knew was the title of the book, Knife.
Yeah.
And in that very powerful opening chapter titled Knife, you talk about the knife being not just an instrument or an implement, or in this case a weapon, but also an idea. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, one of the weird things is that I never saw the knife. I have no visual memory of the knife. I mean, now I do, because it was entered in evidence in the trial. A 10-inch blade. But at the time, it was an abstraction. I mean, I understood that I'd been punctured all over the place a number of times, but I never saw the weapon. And then I thought, well, then I began, because I'm that kind of writer, I began to think of the knife as metaphor. And I had this idea that if I was fighting back, that my only weapon is language. So I thought, well, language is a kind of knife. And if you're in a knife fight, bring a knife. and I thought, this is my weapon with which I can fight back.
Your book.
The book became, and that's why it's called Knife, because it's my way of fighting the knife that came at me.
And oddly, your attacker came to the event with a whole bag of knives.
Well, I think only 2 or 3 extra knives, but it's very weird to bring a backpack with a selection of knives.
Do you have any idea what that was about?
No, no.
Did it come out at the trial or anything?
He didn't give any testimony at the trial, so I have no way of knowing what he was thinking. But I thought, well, what did he think? Or did he want to make a last-minute decision on which one to use, or do you want to pass them out to other people, join in? You know, it's very mysterious.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things that he did which are very mysterious. Like, for example, the last thing he did just about before he got on the bus from New Jersey to Western New York, almost in Canada, just the other side of Lake Erie.
Yeah.
He called the gym and canceled his gym membership. That was the last thing he did. I guess he thought, I may not be coming back soon, and why go on paying the monthly installments? It's kind of interesting what people think is important when they're about to commit murder.
Well, for all the darkness and violence of the attack you describe in your memoir, Knife is also a story about love, about your relationship with your wife of about 6 years, Eliza, the writer and photographer, Rachel Eliza Griffiths, who's
Oops, it was over there somewhere.
just somewhere over there.
No, I mean, I see, what I thought is, to describe the attack itself doesn't take that long. You know, I mean, I could do that in a dozen pages. So I thought, that's not a book. That's an article. So if there's a book in this, what's the book? And in the end, I came to think of it as a shape. I came to think of it as a triangle at whose points were me, one of the points of the triangle, and the attacker at the second point, and Eliza at the third point, representing opposite poles, you know, life and death, love and hate. And I thought, well, that's a book. You know, the relationship between these 3 things, me, and these 2 forces, one very powerfully negative and one very powerfully positive. And me at the intersection of those forces. And so that became the book. And so I thought also how nice it would be to surprise people when they thought they were going to get a kind of true crime story, that they get a love story instead.
Yeah. And I mean, is that one of the miracles, if we can call it that, of the experience you described
Well,
in there?
it certainly helped me stay alive, you know. I mean, I think I say in the book somewhere that love is a real force. It's not just a sentimental thing. It's a thing with power. And it can save your life.
Although you say it's not easy to write about happiness. As the saying goes, happiness writes white.
Writes white.
It's white ink on white paper.
Yeah.
Or Tolstoy's all happy families are the same, but each are
But Tolstoy's wrong. You know, all happy families are the same. No, they're not. You know, I know it's, you know, Anna Karenina is a great novel and it's the opening line, but it's wrong. No,
yeah.
Count Tolstoy. Little revision, perhaps.
But why did you want to? I mean, I
No,
understand the symmetry or the.
What I wanted to do was to say, first of all, that happiness was the antithesis of the kind of unpleasantness that came in my direction, but also to ask the question about when you are the subject of an attack of that kind, how do you get your life back? How do you regain happiness, peace, calm? You know? And so that's also part of what the book's about.
Well, the other miracle, of course, is that you survived. I mean, it wasn't at all clear at first that you would, but you don't like to describe it as such, as a miracle. Why not?
Well, because I don't believe in miracles. You know, I just happen to be the recipient of one. But but the kind of miracle it is, which I do believe in, and I believe in the miracle of medicine. I believe in the miracle of the skill of surgeons. You know, the things that saved my life were those. And then there were pieces of just blind good luck. For example, what happened is that I was transported very quickly from the scene of the crime to a trauma hospital across the state line in Pennsylvania by helicopter. And the fact is that it was a very nice day. It was sunny and warm and beautiful. If it had been raining and not a nice day, the helicopter couldn't have flown. And if the helicopter couldn't have flown, I wouldn't be here. So that's just the weather helped. So the combination of things like just straightforward good luck and medical skill, that I believe, that's what I think happened. I believe that those made miracles. I just don't think a hand reached down from the skies and protected me, because I think the hand would know that I'm not on that team.
The trial of your assailant, who in your book you call the A, and I think
you can fill in your own word.
Yeah, but also
I
think that not using the name,
I didn't want his name in my book.
Yeah,
I still don't use his name.
Yeah, so that took place just this past February at the Chautauqua County Courthouse. Were you required to testify? It is something you felt you needed to do?
No, I was subpoenaed.
Okay.
And yeah, the district attorney wanted me there and said that it would be very powerful for the jury to hear directly from me.
And in court, you recount what was almost a version of the opening chapter of your book. It's in visceral detail. What was it like to be there in the same room with your would-be murderer?
I thought he was very unimpressive. I thought he was a little jerk. And that's the first thing I thought. And the second thing I thought was, yeah, but little jerks can almost kill you. As far as I could see, he never looked in my direction. He was at a table on the other side of the courtroom with his attorneys and a sort of yellow pad, and he seemed to be intently looking down at the yellow pad and kind of, I don't know what he was doing, doodling, making notes, I have no idea. He wasn't impressive to look at or in his behavior. I felt quite neutral about it, actually. I didn't know how I would feel, and I felt kind of nothing.
And you felt?
Sort of nothing about him. It didn't bother me being there. Maybe it bothered him, maybe it should.
After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of assault and attempted murder in the second degree. Did that give you any sense of closure?
Yeah, no, it felt good. I mean, I wasn't there by the time because that was the whole trial was spread over just under 2 weeks. I was in touch with the district attorney, and I remember I was home when he sent me a text saying guilty on both counts. And I thought, that felt very good. What we still don't know is the sentencing.
The sentencing was supposed to happen a couple of days ago, but
and for mysterious reasons, at the request of the defense, apparently, it was postponed. Why? I have no explanation. Nobody's given me an explanation. But May the 16th now, I hope. I mean, unless there are any further delays, I don't know why there should be.
Yeah. You hope so there can be a kind of closure? I mean, you want it to...
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I think just to draw a line under it, I think I want to know how long he gets. I mean, the maximum sentence in New York State for attempted murder is 25 years. But because he also attacked Henry, who was on stage with me, and he was found guilty of aggravated assault against Henry, that's another 7. So it's up to the judge to decide whether the sentences run consecutively or concurrently. And I mean, I hope he gets as long as he's only 27. So I don't want him to be out on the street anytime soon, but not in my hands.
Now, I mean, if you'll forgive me using the word, the miracle of your survival, and the book Knife that came from it, you have a new work of fiction coming out this fall, stories written since the attack.
Most of them. I mean, there's 5 stories, of which 3 are very long. I mean, 3 are novellas, really, of like 70-odd pages each. And there's 2 short stories of more like 20 pages each. The 2 short stories have both been published before in the New Yorker. But the 3 novellas are new. And that's all I'm going to say.
Wait a second. The book you've already said all kinds of things about it. It's called The 11th...
I withdraw them all.
The 11th Hour?
Yeah.
A quintet of stories?
Yeah, that says that on the cover, so yes.
Yeah, okay. And they are set in Bombay, England, Cambridge especially, and the U.S.?
Yeah, and little journeys to Spain as well, and into the Kafkaesque at one point.
Right, because there's allusions to Goya, Kafka, and Hieronymus Bosch, just to give a sense of the tone.
Yeah, there's a bit of each of them. Yeah. No, I was in Madrid last year and was in the Prado and went to see the Velázquez, the Goya, and the Bosch. And in the room with the famous Bosch paintings of the Garden of Earthly Delights and all that, now, there's a much smaller painting which struck me, which is called The Extraction of the Stone of Madness. There's a wonderful idea that madness is a stone which you can extract. So I was thinking about that, and that has something to do with this. I'm not going to say much more about it.
I know. Okay.
But that painting is available for everyone to see if you happen to be in Madrid. So yeah, the stories are very unlike each other. They're not only in setting, but also in manner. They're 3 quite different, and I like that about them, that they, weirdly, it seems to me that they kind of go together very well, partly because they're 3 very different kinds of fiction. So it's just a way of saying I can do this and I can do that too, and and here's another thing I can do.
I look forward to reading it. You're insistently forward-looking, certainly in your writing, and writing so much. But you have a line in Knife that caught my attention. It says, "We would not be who we are today without the calamities of our yesterdays."
Beckett. It's Samuel Beckett. I just stole it.
That's why I caught it. But it also made me think about something the central character of your last novel, Victory City, writes, a narrative poem called Victory and Defeat. And you say that could also be the title for the story of your life, Victory and Defeat. But for someone following your career for decades, I see only victory.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you
you
so
don't
much.
see the other stuff.
Thank you to both of you. This is the Q&A period. Let's say some question. Where are the media? The question is from the media, basically. So, Leila, please name yourself. Come here.
Yes, hello again. Leila Malou from La Presse newspaper. I wanted to ask you, you were born in everyone's city. You've lived in many countries. Where do you call home? How do you call a place home?
Well, I mean, the simple answer to that is home is the place that you have the key to the front door. and there's only one place I have the key to the front door, and that's in New York. So, but I think the idea of home has changed in our time because so many people have left the place which was home to make a home somewhere else. It's an age of movement. And so the idea of home becomes more complicated. And I think that many of us who've had these lives which are characterized by movement have a multiple idea of home. If I go to Bombay, it's the place I was born and raised and my parents lived, and et cetera, and that has a very powerful sense of home. If I go to London, where I've probably lived more than anywhere else in my life, and where I have many of my oldest friendships, and both my children live there, and et cetera, I have a very strong sense of home there. And I've lived in New York now for, 26 years. So all 3 of them in very different ways feel like home, and I think I can have 3 homes. I only have a house in one.
Another question from media? Oh, so Mr., please. Stand up, name yourself, and say the question.
I'm Charles Monti, and we Canadians pride ourselves on being very different than the atmosphere of censorship which is pervasive in the US right now. But Canada was actually the only Western country that banned the synthetic verses, if only for 2 days. Then the Prime Minister apologized and swore that the system would be changed, which it never was. And today, 1,000 books every year can be stopped at the border, just like yours. Any reaction to that?
Well, I mean, the Satanic Verses has been freely available in Canada since 1988 or early 1989. So
And Canadian politician Bob Rae, who was Premier of Ontario, was the first politician to...
yeah, I mean, I came here in, what was it, 92?
1992.
92, and he kissed me. And there's photographic evidence.
Yeah.
The 2 most depressive people I've been kissed by were both Canadian. One is Bob Rae, and the other is Leonard Cohen.
When did that happen?
I had to, he was, there was a point where Penn America used to give, they stopped doing it rather stupidly, awards for songwriting, for lyric writing. And the first year of the award, we gave it to 2 awards. We gave it to Leonard Cohen and Chuck Berry. And they both came. And Leonard Cohen, I had to make the little speech about him and hang the medal around his neck. And when I did that, he kissed me. I was very impressed.
Any more questions? Well, Amanda, just name yourself. Yeah.
My name is Salman Rushdie, and I'd like to know if you've met so much adversity through the years. Where do you find the courage to keep on writing and to keep on doing lectures like you're doing today? Where do you find the energy and the courage to go on?
You know, I have no other skill. I mean, what else would I do with my time? You know, I may as well write books because otherwise I'd be on the dole. No, I mean, truthfully, books have always been my way of understanding the world I live in and the life and times in which I find myself. And I like telling stories. I'm happier, and ask anybody who knows me, I'm much happier when I have a book to write than when I don't. When I don't have a book to write, I sometimes can get a little grouchy. So I do it because I love it, you know. And when there are writers who say how much they hate writing, and I don't believe them. You know. It's very, very hard. That's true. I mean, it's extremely difficult to write a good page, let alone more. But it's the most rewarding thing that I've found to do with my life. You know. So I do it.
And coming out in public and doing... This is your first time in Canada on stage?
First time on Canada on stage, but I mean, the difference now is that we have to be careful about security, which is why it took you all so long to get in here. But that's unfortunately going to be the case if I'm going to do public events from now on, because I certainly don't want any repetition. But there are ways of doing things which we're getting better and better at, learning how to do it, so that it becomes possible to meet with all of you and to have conversations like this. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life sitting somewhere in a room wishing that my life was different. You know, make it different.
That's right. One last question.
I read your book last week in a day. It was really truly a love story to me, and I'm so glad to hear that that's how you perceived it as well too, because the title didn't seem to take you in that direction. You talked about happiness, and I thought the whole book was written with this desperate need to get back to that life of happiness. Seeing you today, it feels like this was almost cathartic for you.
Yeah, so I mean, to some extent, yes, it was cathartic. But it was more, the way I would describe it is that it was a way of taking ownership of the event and changing the power dynamic. Instead of being the victim of an attack, I become the author of a book about an attack. And it becomes my story, not his story. And he becomes a character in my story, rather than me being a character in his story. And that felt good, you know. And not naming him felt excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I thought, you know, as Andy Warhol used to say, we all get 15 minutes of fame. Well, he's had his 15 minutes. And now he can go back to being nobody. Hopefully in jail, hopefully for a long time. But, so yeah, it felt like that. It felt like taking charge of it and making it, giving myself back the kind of agency. You know, that, and yes, I suppose you could call that, what that adds up to is catharsis. Yes.
Thank you very much. This is not the end, because Salman Rushdie agrees to sign copies of his book. So he will sign over there. You just, the table, the book to sell are over there. So you stay in line, you buy your book, and then you stay in line, and then you get your copy signed. And that will be, I thank you very much for your attention. I thank him, and Eleanor Wachtel, and all of you.